people make the mistake of trying to supply what they think a director or a casting agent is looking for. But there's nothing wrong with doing your research, finding out what a director does, if there's a style or if there's a way they shoot or is a particular process that they like or a look that they like. There's no harm in knowing that. But it seems to me that when you get too deeply involved in that, or when you marry too closely to that, that the danger becomes real, that you end up trying to chase that or present that, when in actual fact, what the director or casting director is looking for is something they've never seen before. And you are someone they've never seen before. And if we could find a way of exposing the individual in an audition, 10 chances to 1, that's going to cause their eyebrows to raise, because it's not something they would have expected. The majority who are going for the audition will be going in trying to replicate something they've assessed or they've assumed is being desired or looked for. And the other side of that is that you can walk away from an audition not really, I mean, yes, obviously investing in the hope that it goes well, but not investing such that you're crestfallen if you don't get it, because it just so happened that what you brought wasn't what they were looking for or what fit their requirements. It's nothing to do with a negative reflection on your performance. But it easily can become that if you go in trying to replicate what you think they're looking for. A lot of the people I speak to, my clients, about auditions or meetings or whatever, is that they've always noticed, pretty much everybody has noticed, that when they don't really care about the meeting, it's the one that they're successful in. When you don't care, or you're too tired or whatever, you don't have the energy to even care, whatever the case might be, when that's the situation, there's more of you visible, because you're not trying to hide it, because you don't care. And then, hey presto, we see more of who you really are. And that's interesting. Because ultimately, what the audience want to see is the same thing as the director sees. The audience is not interested in seeing someone pretend to be somebody else, because that makes it difficult for them to disappear into the performance. If they see someone that is so close to who they are, so that the audience believes they're voyeuristically watching the performance, it allows them invent their own story, because you're not telling them what to think. In fact, you don't care what they think. So it's not dissimilar. It's pretty much the same thing, except in the audition, it's a little bit more confined to a specific individual or a specific small group of individuals. But we still make the same mistake when it comes to an audience. We're afraid that that we might fail the audience, or we might fail in our performance. So what the audience sees is someone afraid of failing. Even though we might be good at masking that, deep down, the animal instinct in the audience will recognize somewhere subliminally that this person is trying to hide the fear of failure by pretending they're not going to fail, or by trying, perhaps better still, to provide what they think the audience want. When in truth, the audience want the very opposite. That's what they're looking for. They want to disappear into someone that doesn't even know they're there. The only place you'll find character is in the self, is in you. If we spend our time trying to be somebody else, what we're really doing is spending our time trying not to be ourselves, but to be somebody else. And that, by definition, is a negative reflection on who we are, or who we think we are. So researching character is as much about researching the self as it is about exposing ourselves to different scripts and different environments and observing how we operate in those environments so that we can develop a palette of expression, a palette of characteristics that all emanate from us, from who we are. This also allows for a truer performance, one which is not masked, one which is not, which relies less on pretense. Character is something that everybody has, but the job of the actor is to develop their palette of character or their character muscle such that they are capable of switching roles with relative ease. Memory is not linear. We don't remember like a tape running through our heads with all the dialogue or with all the events. If that were the case and I were asked to remember what happened yesterday, it would take me an entire day to remember it, obviously, because I'd go through every single step. In order for us to remember what happened yesterday, we categorize or we conceptualize the events. Those concepts are derived from our emotional perspective of the events. And we will only remember the events that mattered most to us. The reason that they have an emotional connection is because they matter most to us. So if that's the case, as I'm speaking, it's patently obvious that I'm not speaking from a script, or I'm not memorizing a script. However, if we look at how I'm formulating my sentences, I'm doing it in such a way as to indicate I'm describing a concept. That is how everybody speaks. We describe concepts with our vocabulary, with our language. Now, if that's the case, what we're looking to achieve with dialogue is the very same thing. We want, when we deliver dialogue, we want it to appear as though we're describing concepts, just as we are when we're having a conversation. It's closer to the natural scheme of things. So, how do we approach script? How do we approach script in the knowledge that we have of how memory works? How do we use that information? When we read a script, if we approach a script with a predetermined or with a judgment already formed after the first read or whatever, if we're looking for clues, if we're looking for judgments, if we're looking for elements that are in the script that might not necessarily be there, but we're looking for them, what we run the risk of doing is missing more pertinent emotional connections to the script. So now we come to a script in a slightly different fashion. How we approach it is you read the material through, you read the script through, no judgment, nothing, without looking for anything. The second time you read it through, guaranteed, you will remember aspects of it. Some of it might be a surprise you won't remember. You might say, oh, I didn't see that before. Third read, you're beginning to anticipate what's coming next. Fourth read, you are anticipating what's coming next. But what's interesting is we have conceptualized, we've begun to create concepts. And the memory of the script is encapsulated in concepts, not in dialogue. And each time we read it through, what we find is that the dialogue that we're reading starts to describe the concepts that we have accumulated. As we go through that, what then happens is that we can block out, or not block out, we can block or square off or put shapes in the script that represent roughly the concepts. Now we're in a position to actually describe each scene. And by describing each scene, we don't need to use the dialogue. All we need now to do is to incorporate the dialogue. And that's a very different approach. Now the dialogue is serving us. We are not serving the dialogue. The other beauty of that is that our investment in the scene is greater, because it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because if we don't involve ourselves completely in the concepts, we won't remember the dialogue. And by definition, if we involve ourselves fully in the concepts, we are emotionally more involved in the dialogue and in the scenes. So effectively, it is a far more interesting approach and probably a more successful one. We've found here at Bow Street more success in approaching scenes this way and ending up camera ready much quicker than were to be learned by rote and then going back to try and figure out what the dialogue means. It's a much more interesting, it's much more involving and rewarding. The other interesting thing, it ties nicely in with character as well, because each individual brings a whole other read or a whole other take to what otherwise would be the same performance or the same or roughly the same, trying to serve the dialogue. It's a very different approach, a very interesting approach, and I believe it is crucial to the theories that we have and the practices we have here at Bow Street.